Okay, let's move on to the Champions League tonight. Sporting against Arsenal. It's 8 o'clock kickoff live on talkSPORT 2. Kevin De Bruyne has cast doubt on his future now, claiming contract talks between him and the club have been put on hold while he tries to rediscover his form. Manchester City at the same time as that game, by the way, hosting Feyenoord, aiming to get back to winning ways after 5 consecutive defeats. But contracts are in the discussion point this week because of the Mo Salah incident and because of what De Bruyne said yesterday.
When I started the season, I know things would happen and talks would happen, but then I unfortunately had that thing against Brentford. So I've put basically everything to the side. I was hoping to be out for a couple of days, and it ended up being 8-9 weeks. So also for the moment, I'd rather still get better to that first and see how I am, and the rest will come. I'm not really too obsessed with things right now. I know people will ask me questions about this, but there's not a lot I can say. There's not been a lot of talks. So, I can only give you the answers that I'm giving you right now because there's nothing really more to talk about. Talks will come. If no talks come, then it's my last year. So I don't know. I'm trying to be honest, and people can say or write about it. Yeah, I can't affect that. I just want to play good football, and we'll see what the future holds.
It's fascinating, isn't it, when you listen to Kevin De Bruyne and you see the interview that Mo Salah gave this week, two of the Premier League superstars who are coming to the end of their deals, and the way with which they've decided to allow that to come into the media. They've brought it up themselves. They've talked about it openly, saying that, maybe that I leave at the end of the year, dripping those little explosive comments into post-match or pre-match interviews. Is it a good tactic for negotiating a new contract?
Again, it's related to the environment that you're in. I happen to agree with Jamie Carragher's assessment of Mo Salah and what he's doing. I don't think it's particularly edifying. I don't think it's particularly necessary. The characterisation of the fact that the club haven't put a formal contract in front of them, they possibly haven't, because they might well be trying to find out precisely what you want and seeing if it economically makes sense to what they clearly have evidence in front of them, which is a very talented player that can probably go on and on and on.
And just to sort of dispel the myth, the likelihood of a player seeing a contract before the day he sits down and actually signs it is remote, right?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. The fact that they're having discussions and obviously if we're talking about with Salah, the idea that he wants a 3-year contract and not a 2, then someone's having a bloody conversation somewhere. And when Carragher made the point, the fact that, according to him, it's well known and well established amongst the Liverpool press that he doesn't stop in the mix zone, and yet all of a sudden he stopped to make this particular point. I don't see the necessity of it.
Well, know exactly what he's trying to do. He's trying to up the ante, isn't he?
Well, sure, but that to me, if you're asking me what I think of that, I dislike that.
Okay, so who would you rather negotiate with? Someone like Mo Salah, who's ramping up the rhetoric around it by doing these little interviews where he says it. Kevin De Bruyne, who will walk into a negotiation himself.
I know.
With his own data and say to you, this is what I think I'm worth. What do you think I'm worth?
He'll walk in unrepresented by a lawyer, by an agent. He might well walk in with a lawyer, like I think he did during the COVID situation when he got on to various Zoom calls and all the players were telling us how much they didn't want to contribute towards reducing their wages during COVID. So De Bruyne was quite active in that conversation. I don't know. It depends upon the personality. I mean, I've always got respect for players that represent themselves. I think at this stage in your career, there's no reason for you not to represent yourself. And the only reason you don't want to represent yourself is because you're either stupid or lazy. Because at 30-odd years of age, you're a grown man. And so you're perfectly capable of knowing what you're worth. You just don't want to tell somebody it.
Yes, but you said quite rightly earlier on that sometimes a bit of distance in negotiations is important. So if you're the owner and you're the money, if you're the player and you're the talent, sometimes it's better to step away and let somebody else do that as a good position for negotiating.
There is some rationale behind that, absolutely. But more often than not, you find that agents don't provide solutions. And if you're in a situation where the player knows precisely what he wants, it's about imparting that wisdom and cutting to the chase. And the real reason why players will use agents is because they don't have to pay them. And if they did have to pay them, you'd see the reduction in how many players actually used agents.
Do you think that Kevin De Bruyne or Mo Salah is in a better negotiating position?
Of the two, in comparison, I think there's going to be a rebuild at Man City. And
so Salah then?
I think Salah is in a better position. Although I would suggest
he's contributing more because he's not been as injured as De Bruyne, I suppose.
Yes, and also with the Liverpool, it's a difficult one to answer because we don't know what Liverpool's model is, and we don't know what Liverpool. We've seen Liverpool's model before, which is we need to sell players to buy players. When they made the decision to really invest in two key signings in Virgil van Dijk and the goalkeeper Alisson, they used Coutinho money to do it. And it seems to me that Liverpool don't spend inordinate amounts of money over and above what they generate from sales, where Man City is a different model.
They're also generating more money now because of the stadium rebuild.
Indeed, but that's in single-digit millions, not in tens and tens and tens of millions. And so with that in mind, it looks to me that there's a balance between what Mo Salah is going to cost to be replaced against what Mo Salah is going to charge them additional on his wages, against is there a resale value, and what is the outcome if Mo Salah in 2 years' time deteriorates, which will always be Saudi Arabia, but there in 2 years' time. For me, it's a no-brainer. Whether I like his conduct in the press, I think that Mo Salah should be signed by Liverpool. If it's a 3-year deal, give him a 3-year deal. Because you've got exit strategies. You know that if Mo Salah wants... The only challenge is if Mo Salah's got some ridiculous notion in his head that he can get £1 million a week tax-free. I'm not suggesting that's what he's saying, but not knowing why Liverpool, who normally take care of business and normally take care of what's going forward, and quite frankly, not having any troubles at this moment in time because they're the top of the league, despite the fact they defied conventional orthodoxy by not buying a single player with a new manager coming through the door. All of that tells you that Liverpool kind of half know what they're doing. And I don't really know why Salah needs to create the downward pressure by leaking or talking things through to the media. Maybe when he had his haircut, he lost his judgment.
He didn't just have his haircut, by the way.
And by the way, his form has been brilliant, and I was probably wrong earlier on this year to say that it wasn't world class.
He's absolutely terrific. There's no doubt about that.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.